Namaskar. I hope you have seen the summary video, the introduction video, because that's very important. Unless you see it and understand it, it will be a little difficult for you to understand this complex story. Okay, so let's get started if you have already seen that. And I will go through each and every line and each and every word in detail. And we'll be doing it in about 4 parts so that थोड़ा छोटा हो, easy रहेगा आपको समझने में. The Jijamata Express spread along the Pune-Bombay route considerably faster than the Deccan Queen. Deccan Queen is another train. Jijamata Express is one train. Okay. And this is on the Pune to Mumbai or Bombay route. The first stop, Lonavala, which people in Bombay, Mumbai, Pune, etc. would be quite familiar with, a very popular getaway hill station of sorts, came in 40 minutes. That is from Pune to Lonavala. The Ghat section that followed was no different from what he knew. Ghat section is where you have the hills and the mountains and the valleys, right? The train stopped at Karjat only briefly and went on at even greater speed. Karjat is a place where a lot of film shootings, etc. take place. It rode through Kalyan. Sped along means moving very fast. Rode is referring to the sound made by the trains, you know, when they are really traveling at a very high speed. Meanwhile, the racing mind of Professor Gaitonde. Now we are introduced to our main person of this story, Professor Gangadhar Pant Gaitonde, had arrived at a plan of action in Bombay. The racing mind means that, you know, his mind is really thinking fast. Meanwhile, the racing mind of Professor Gaitonde had arrived at a plan of action in Bombay. Indeed, as a historian, so we come to know that he is a historian. He felt that he should have thought of it sooner, that he should have thought of it earlier. Pehle sochna tha. He would go to a big library and browse through history books. That was the surest way of finding out how the present state of affairs was reached. He also planned eventually to return to Pune and have a long talk with Rajendra Deshpande, who would surely help him understand what had happened. Rajendra Deshpande is a physicist who is his friend. That is assuming that in this world, now here is a hint. पहले आप पढ़ेंगे आपको समझ में नहीं आएगा कि इस लाइन का मतलब क्या है. अगर राजेंद्र देशपांडे को वो जानते थे, so why is he writing that in this world there existed someone called Rajendra Deshpande? Because Professor Gaitonde is now in a different world. He's in a coma. He's in a different world, and in that world, he's not sure if there is someone who exists called Rajendra Deshpande. Okay. So he's saying that he wants to have a chat with Professor Deshpande, but he's not sure whether there is someone exists by that name, right? But he wants to go and check out the history books. The train stopped beyond the long tunnel. It was a small station called Sarhad. Now, Sarhad in Hindi, or rather in Urdu, means border. Okay. An Anglo-Indian in uniform went through the train checking permits. Why was he checking permits? We will come to know, because an Anglo-Indian, because this part of Maharashtra or Bombay rather was still under the control of the East India Company, because the history has been changed, right? So it's still, that's why just like you need a passport and a visa when you enter another country, to enter Bombay, you need a permit. Okay. This is where the British Raj begins. You are going for the first time, I presume, Khan Sahib asked. So there is another passenger called Khan Sahib, a minor role. He says, यहाँ से British का राज शुरू होता है. पहली बार आ रहे हैं क्या आप? Yes, the reply was factually correct. Gangadhar Pant had not been to this Bombay before. This is an important word out here. ये वाले बॉम्बे में गंगाधर पंत साहब कभी पहले नहीं आए थे, तो वो सच बोल रहे थे. फैक्चुअली ही वाज करेक्ट. देन ही आस्क्ड, ही वेंचर्ड ए क्वेश्चन, एक क्वेश्चन पूछा उन्होंने. एंड खान साहिब, how will you go to Peshawar? Now this is strange. Would trains from India go to Pakistan? I mean, you have the Samjhauta Express, but that's a specific train, right? This train goes to Victoria Terminus. I will take the Frontier Mail tonight out of Central. Okay. That is Mumbai Central. How far does it go? By what route? Bombay to Delhi, then to Lahore, and then Peshawar. A long journey. I will reach Peshawar the day after tomorrow. Thereafter, Khan Sahib spoke a lot about his business and Gangadhar Pant was a willing listener. ध्यान से सुन रहे थे. For in that way, he was able to get some flavor of life in this India that was so different. So he's in a different India, a Bombay, which is still under the control of the British. He wasn't aware of that. So what I told you in the introduction video, the history that he is knowing, or rather the present that he is knowing now, is very different from the reality that has existed in the real world. Okay. The train now passed through the suburban rail traffic. Suburban means outskirts of the city. The blue carriages carried the letters GBMR on the side. Greater Bombay Metropolitan Railway. Explained Khan Sahib. See the tiny Union Jack painted on each carriage, on each train compartment. A gentle reminder that we are in British territory. यूनियन जैक देखने से पता चलता है कि हम ब्रिटिश टेरिटरी में हैं. बॉम्बे वॉज अंडर द कंट्रोल ऑफ द ब्रिटिशर्स. ओके. द ट्रेन बिगैन टू स्लो डाउन बियॉन्ड दादर एंड स्टॉप्ड only at its destination. And what is the destination? Victoria Terminus, which is now known as Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Terminus. The station looked remarkably neat and clean. The staff was mostly made up of Anglo-Indians and Parsis, along with a handful of British officers. So he has described what the railway station looked like. And please note, Anglo-Indians and Parsis, right? So he's talking of a different kind of a Bombay. As he emerged from the station, Gangadhar Pant found himself facing an imposing building. What is an imposing building? A very impressive looking building. The letters proclaimed its identity to those who did not know this Bombay landmark. This building was a landmark. Yani ki Bombay meant this particular building, just like Victoria Terminus or the Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus is seen as a landmark of Bombay, just like the Gateway of India is seen as another landmark of Mumbai, or the Taj Mahal Hotel, right? Or so the India Gate is seen as a landmark of Delhi along with Qutub Minar, or the Charminar is seen as a landmark of Hyderabad, right? Similarly, this was an imposing building. And उस बिल्डिंग के ऊपर क्या लिखा था, ये सब डिटेल्स आपको याद रखना पड़ेगा, because इसमें से क्वेश्चन पूछे जा सकते हैं. I've written all this in the question and answers in the PDF also. East India House headquarters of the East India Company. Prepared as he was for many shocks. He was prepared for many shocks, but this Professor Gaitonde had not expected, because he was not aware of it. He's a professor of history, but उनको ये नहीं मालूम था, अरे ब्रिटिशर्स का राज अभी भी बॉम्बे पे चल रहा है. The East India Company had been wound up shortly after the events of 1857. History में 10th class में पढ़ा है आपने. 1857 mutiny के बाद the East India Company was wound up. Queen Victoria became the Empress of India, right? At least that's what the history book said. Yet here it was not only alive but flourishing. Itna bada building right opposite the railway station. So history had taken a different turn, perhaps before 1857, which he was not aware of. How and when had it happened? He had to find out. So if you are asked a question as to what did he think he had to find out, this is what he had to find out, that he had to go and find out how did history take a different turn. As he walked along Hornby Road, as it was called, he found a different set of shops and office buildings. There was no handloom house building. Instead, there were Boots and Woolworth departmental store, imposing offices of Lloyds, Barclays, and other British banks, as in a typical high street of a town in England. So it looked like a town in England. Now, Hornby Street, abhi uska naam hai Dada Bhai Naroji, the grand old man of India. Remember history books of 10th class? So now it's called Dada Bhai Naroji Road. Earlier, it was called Hornby Road. It stretches from Crawford Market. Those from Bombay will be aware, Mumbai will be aware. Crawford Market right up to Flora Fountain and goes via the Victoria Terminus or the Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus. It was named Hornby Road at that time after William Hornby, who was the governor of Bombay from 1771 to 1784 under the East India Company. Bit of history, as I said, मैंने काफी research किया इसके ऊपर. Now, Lloyds, Barclays, are all prominent British banks. I used to have an account in Barclays Bank when I was studying in UK, right? You had to compulsorily open an account in a British bank. Okay. Now, he turned right along Home Street and entered Forbes building. I wish to meet Mr. Vinay Gaitonde, please, he said to the English receptionist. English receptionist, please make a note. Who is Vinay Gaitonde? Vinay Gaitonde is his son. She searched through the telephone list. Will she find him? No, she won't. The staff list and then the directory of employees of all the branches of the firm. She shook her head and said, I'm afraid I can't find anybody of that name either here or in any of our branches. Are you sure he works here? This was a blow, not totally unexpected. If he himself were dead in his world, because Gaitonde को खुद विश्वास नहीं था कि वो खुद जिंदा है या नहीं. If he himself is not there, how will his son be alive, right? So, and what guarantee had he that his son would be alive? Indeed, he may not even have been born, right? He thanked the girl politely and came out. It was characteristic of him not to worry about where he would stay. His main concern was to make his way to the library of the Asiatic Library, which is society, which is still there in Mumbai, to solve the riddle of history, because there are too many questions that he needed an answer to. Grabbing a quick lunch at the restaurant, he made his way to the town hall. Okay, so initially, jo pehle he wanted to refer to history, that was because of the part of the chapter which is not there in the version that is there in your textbook. That is, he wanted to check about the catastrophe theory, applying it to the Battle of Panipat, etc. But now he wants to find out ye Britishers bhala abhi yahan pe Bombay mein kar kya rahe hain. Okay, he went to the town hall. Let's continue. Yes, to his relief, the town hall was there and it did house the library. He entered the reading room and asked for a list of history books, including his own, the books that Professor Gaitonde had himself written. Because remember, he's a very prominent professor of history. His age in the chapter, in this particular story, is actually some 55 years old. Again, not mentioned in this part of the chapter in your NCERT textbook. His 5 volumes duly arrived on the table. So 5 volumes of history were brought by the librarian onto his table. He started from the beginning. Volume 1 took up the history up to Ashoka. Volume 2 went up to Samudragupta. Volume 3 up to Muhammad Ghori. Volume 4 up to the death of Aurangzeb. Okay. Up to this period, the history was as he knew it. No problem. History, जिस तरह से history उनको मालूम थी, बिल्कुल सही history लिखी गई थी. The change had evidently happened in the 5th volume. That is the last volume. The 5th volume gave a different version of history. Reading volume 5 from both ends inwards. Aage se bhi, piche se bhi. He's reading from both ends. How he did it, I don't know. Okay. Gangadhar Pant Gaitonde finally converged on the precise moment where history had taken a different turn. वो precise जगह जहां पर इतिहास बदल गया था, where history had taken a different turn. That page in the book described the Battle of Panipat, the 3rd Battle of Panipat, fought in January 1761. And it mentioned that the Marathas won it handsomely, that the Marathas जीत गए थे, लेकिन जीता कौन था? Afghans. Marathas हार गए थे. Abdali was routed, according to this particular book, that Ahmad Shah Abdali was routed. Routed means not routed. Routed means defeated. And he was chased back to Kabul by the triumphant, that is the victorious Maratha army led by Sadashiv Rao Bhau and his nephew, the young Vishwas Rao. So they were the leaders of the Maratha army and they chased Abdali right way back to Kabul in Afghanistan. The book did not go into a blow-by-blow account. Blow-by-blow account means systematic, detailed description of the battle itself. Battle के बारे में पूरा detail में नहीं दिया. Okay. Rather, it elaborated in detail its consequences on the power struggle in India. Gangadhar Pant read through the account avidly. Avidly means with a lot of interest, with a lot of keenness. The style of writing was unmistakably his because it is a book written by Gangadhar Pant only. लेकिन उनको ऐसा लग रहा था that he was reading it for the first time. Yet he was reading the account for the first time. He was not aware that he had written something like this, even though the writing style, सबका एक writing style होता है ना, आपका एक writing style होगा, मेरा एक writing style होगा, was his. He recognized the writing style. He did not remember having written anything of this sort before, right? Because in his real mind, he wouldn't have written a wrong piece of history. है ना? यहां तक समझ में आया? Their victory in the battle was not only a great morale booster. Okay. Morale booster means something which makes you feel better and confident, right? Makes you feel high in spirits. But it also established their supremacy in northern India. Now, this is the other history that he is reading. The consequences of the Marathas winning the third battle of Pani. According to that book, which he does not remember having written, even though he's familiar with the writing style of his, it is giving the consequences. उसके बाद इंडिया में क्या हुआ उसके बारे में इस पूरे पेज पे है. Their victory in the battle was not only a great morale booster to the Marathas, but it also established their supremacy in northern India, that is, in and around Delhi. The East India Company, which had been watching all these developments from the sidelines, got the message and temporarily shelved matlab abandoned, dropped its expansionist program, that is, to expand further more in India. For the Peshwas, that is the Marathas, the immediate result was an increase in the influence of Bhau Sahib and Vishwas Rao, who eventually succeeded his father in 1780 AD, right? Hornbill, what did I say? That he was governor of Bombay from 1771, na? मैंने कौन सा date बताया था? Yeah, 1771, right? So, you see the dates are all different now. The troublemaker Dada Sahib, जो मराठास के अंदर एक troublemaker थे Dada Sahib, was relegated means he was sidelined. Okay, he was relegated, pushed down, sidelined to the background, and eventually retired from state politics. To its dismay, that is to its shock, the East India Company met its match. Met its match means found a strong opponent, right? Adversary. In the new Maratha ruler, that is Vishwas Rao. Vishwas Rao and his brother Madhav Rao combined political acumen. Political acumen ka matlab hai someone who is politically clever, politically shrewd, okay, with valor, bravery, and systematically expanded their influence all over India. The company was reduced to pockets of influence near Bombay. इसी वजह से Bombay is still under the control of the East India Company according to his imagination in the imaginary world. Calcutta, Kolkata, Madras, Chennai, just like its European rivals, the Portuguese and the French, because French were there in Pondicherry, etc. Right? Portuguese was there in Goa. For political reasons, the Peshwas kept the puppet Mughal regime alive in Delhi. That is, Aurangzeb sab mar gaya, to abhi kaun Bahadur Shah Zafar, his weak Mughal ruler successors. In the 19th century, these de facto rulers from Pune, de facto means someone who is actually ruling, they may not be there in person. वहां पे कोई Mughal ruler है, लेकिन he is under the control of the Marathas. So Marathas are actually the real rulers, right? So were astute enough. Astute means shrewd and very crafty to recognize the importance of the technological age drawing in Europe. Okay, all that industrial revolution, etc. They set up their own centers for science and technology. Here, the East India Company saw another opportunity to extend its influence. It offered aid and experts. That is, they offered, that we will come and offer you different kinds of technological help and aid. They were accepted only to make the local centers self-sufficient. So the Marathas were really ruling India, which is not the real history. Again and again repeat. Okay. The 20th century brought about further changes. Now, all this is imaginary history. Inspired by the West, India moved towards a democracy. By then, the Peshwas had lost their enterprise and they were gradually replaced by democratically elected bodies. The Sultanate at Delhi survived even this transition largely because it wielded no real influence. The Shahenshah of Delhi was no more than a figurehead to rubber stamp the recommendations made by the central parliament. So democracy ho gayi, parliament was ruling, the Shahenshah was, so India was still under some kind of a monarchy, but he was only a rubber stamp. Okay, so a very imaginary kind of a world Jayant Narlikar has made, which is what Gaitonde is thinking about. As he read on, Gangadhar Pant began to appreciate the India he had seen. It was a country that had not been subjected to slavery for the white man. Britishers का पूरा control नहीं था. It was a different India. It had learned to stand on its feet and knew what self-respect was. So it was different from the India which fought for its freedom from the British. From a position of strength and for purely commercial reasons, it had allowed the British to retain Bombay as the sole outpost on the subcontinent. So the only control the British had was on Bombay. That lease was to expire in the year 2001. The story has been written in 86, 87, right? So it had said that the lease will expire in 2001. That is 15 years later, 14, 15 years later, according to a treaty which was signed in 1908. Gangadhar Pant could not help comparing the country he knew with what he was witnessing around him, what he was seeing in his imagination. But at the same time, he felt that the investigations were incomplete. How did the Marathas win the battle? Ye to hua nahi tha. How did the Marathas win the battle? To find the answer, he must look out for the accounts of the battle itself. कि battle के बारे में जो लिखा गया है, उसके बारे में पता करना जरूरी है. He went through the books and the journals before him. At last, among the books, he found one that gave him the clue. It was Bao Sahib Banchi Bakar, जिसका photograph मैंने पहले वीडियो में दिखाया. I showed you the photograph of the book in the first video. Although he seldom relied on the Bakars, because it's a Marathi prose, it's a historical kind of a treatise. It's a narrative of the Battle of Panipat written in Marathi. Bakar is historical narrative written in Marathi prose. Okay, so he gets curious to reinvestigate the Battle of Panipat because he reads about Indian history which is not factually correct, right? So he gets curious and it all arises from a different result of the third battle of Panipat. It's like, you go on a highway and you take a wrong turn and you go into different kind of forest area, small villages, and you lose your way. Gangadhar Pant has kind of lost his way. So he wants to find something which will help him get to know the truth, the real story. मजा आ रहा है? समझ में आ गया तो मजा आएगा. Okay. So although he seldom relied on the Bakars, seldom means he did not rely on the Bakars. Very rarely he relied on the Bakars because though they were entertaining to read, they were doctored accounts. Doctored accounts means untrue accounts, manipulated accounts. Okay. But sometimes buried in the graphic but doctored, graphic matlab kafi detailed. Graphic matlab detailed, doctored matlab manipulated or something which is not entirely true. He could spot the germ of truth. Germ matlab chota sa kitanu. Okay, germ of truth will be there. He found one now in a 3-line account of how close Vishwas Rao had come to being killed. Okay, us book mein, in his imagination. Please remember this. And then Vishwas Rao guided his horse to the Meili. That's how it is pronounced. Okay, I wanted to make a note of it. Meili means it's essentially means that there is a confusion of a crowd or a scuffle. So Meili. And then Vishwas Rao guided his horse to the Meili where the elite troops were fighting and he attacked them. And God was merciful. God was merciful. A shot brushed past his ear and it went so close कि उसके कान और bullet के बीच में the difference was that only that of a til ka seed, a sesame seed which you can find in your kitchen. That's the difference. It was so very close. At 8 o'clock, the librarian politely reminded the professor that the library was closing for the day. Gangadhar Pant emerged from his thoughts. Looking around, he noticed that he was the only reader left in that magnificent hall at the Asiatic Society Library. I beg your pardon, sir. May I request you to keep these books here for my use tomorrow morning? He intends to come the next morning. By the way, when do you open? At 8 o'clock, sir. The librarian smiled. Here was a user and researcher right after his heart. Means that someone who was so interested in books, the librarian was very pleased with the amount of detailed research work the professor was doing. After his heart means, dil ke kareeb, he really liked what he saw. As the professor left the table, he shoved some notes into his right pocket. The notes that he had taken, he had put into his right pocket. This is an important clue. Please remember this. Absent-mindedly, he also shoved the Bakar into his left pocket. Kitab bhi usne apne left pocket mein dal di. Okay. We will pause here. Yahan tak ka I hope you have understood. Okay. Any doubts, please, of course, ask. But we will go. The intention is to go slowly so that it's clear. So yahan tak uske imaginary dimag, imagination mein kya raha hai, uske baare mein baat hogi. Now he will slowly come back into the real world and that will give us the idea about what kind of an experience he went through. Okay, so I'll now see you in the next part of this video. Thank you very much.